Has the Second American Civil War already started? I'm going to talk about the anti-fascist movement, or Antifa. And we're going to focus in on what that means to us as preppers and the problems that may ensue as we move forward over the next few months and years. We saw Antifa communists cause major disruptions, property damage, and attacking regular citizens during the inauguration. Then fast forward about a month later, and we look at Milo visiting the University of Berkeley, where the anarchist communists are declaring war on this country and setting a building on fire with people in it to prove their point. Then we look at the Patriot Day riots. Trump supporters held pro-freedom of speech rallies all across this nation, and the counter-protests attacking, throwing bottles, throwing rocks, throwing these homemade tear gas grenades. There are mass riots and melee fights that are occurring, and for lack of a better term, street battles taking place in major American cities. And finally, we look at May Day, which is normally the Workers' Party Day. Obviously, the communists are out in force at these rallies as well. They're tearing up the cities. They're setting things on fire. They're breaking into buildings and destroying property as part of the anti-Trump protests or anti-fascist protests. First, anti-fascists or Antifa is just code words for communists and anno-communists. And you'll see these folks making up not just a small percentage of the left's protesters in these riots, but making up the vast majority of these protesters. You see the red flag and the red and black flag throughout all of these protests. The red flag indicating communism, the red and black flag which indicates anarchist communists. These groups are not fringe groups. They are large, well-organized. It is not a handful of guys huddled up in their mom's basement that are planning this. They come out with hundreds and thousands of protesters in these major cities, and they are armed, and they are organized and working together as a team. Currently, the Antifa movement is becoming increasingly violent and organized, and we can't stress that enough. These are not your 1960s hippies. They are armed, first with bottles and rocks and sticks and baseball bats and homemade explosives and homemade tear gas grenades that they're using indiscriminately to target Trump and free speech supporters. Soon, we can expect to see them to start arming themselves with firearms on a wider scale and potentially using those firearms in clashes as they move forward. If we look at Antifa communists that are working in other countries and the arc of progression in those other countries, these things are anticipated by looking at those arcs. Today, we're already seeing Antifa communists arming themselves with firearms, including an incident recently in Phoenix where a column of about 200 Antifa communists patrolled the city streets carrying rifles in a militaristic march. The arming of these groups has already started. Make no mistake. They are just as bold, if not more so, than the far-right Oath Keepers or Patriot movement. The left wants the government to come in and enforce morality and speech codes against the rest of the country. So the government is turning a blind eye. We're not seeing protesters on the left being charged with federal felonies and major criminal activity. In other countries, these Antifa communists have gotten way out of control. They are having major impacts on their national elections and their governments. A perfect example of this is looking at Greece and what happened during the civil unrest there. Most of the folks that were involved in those lean towards the communist system. They're carrying the same flags that we see in American streets today, and they're advocating pure on communism in those countries, the same as the left is pushing for here in the United States. So what does this mean for our country? Well, I think it means that we're looking at a very high risk of civil war or massive unrest, where these groups are going to get out of control and continue to harm innocents. One of the things that you will notice in these videos is their indiscriminate targeting. If they see somebody that they think might be a Trump supporter or a fascist, they will target that person. They will beat them, they will attack them, they will damage their vehicle and harm them seriously, and they have no qualms about doing that. And this differs from far-right ideology, where they really view themselves as the protectors of the populace. Antifa view the general public that doesn't see things the same way as they do as the enemy. And anything goes when you're dealing with the enemy. As we move forward, preppers need to be careful. They need to be mindful of not only what's going on locally, but in major cities around their area of operation and nationally. This is a tinderbox that we have to be very vigilant about. All it's going to take is one situation where Antifa communists come armed and they fire into crowds, or two sets of groups. Trump supporters or far-right or alt-right groups meet against Antifa groups, and in the process, the two groups start firing shots at each other. And make no mistake about it, that is a real risk. If that happens, the situation could devolve nationally in hours or days. The downside to this type of unrest is it spreads like wildfire. It spreads like lighting a tinderbox.